Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Erica McCollum. I'm the Research and Program Analyst here at BC Healthy Communities, and we are very excited today to share this webinar on how Salmon Arm built an anti-racism strategy through collaboration. These speakers today have not only supported an important strategy on anti-racism in their community, but have done so through a very thoughtful process of collaboration and stakeholder engagement. We hope from this webinar you learn some practical knowledge about why a collaborative approach is so valuable and insights for working with your partners, including Indigenous communities and those with lived experience in a productive and respectful way. Next slide, please. To begin, I would like to gratefully acknowledge that BC Healthy Communities is located on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen people, known today as Kosapsum and Songhees nations, as well as the Wasanich people, represented today by Sartlip, Pakachin, Sayout, Sakem, and Malahat nations. We are privileged and grateful to be on these lands that these nations have stewarded since time immemorial and steward to this day. Next slide, please, Pat. Thank you. And sorry, we also welcome you to take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know the lands that you are joining from. And our speakers from Salmon Arm and the Shuswap would also like to take a moment now to do their acknowledgement. So I will pass it over to Tanya Harrington, one of the collaborators working on this project with the Shuswap School District.
Thank you. Welcome. I'm Tanya Harrington from Quisil-Quinaul's Ne Secwepemcúlecw, School District 83. Today's webinar is a little bit different from other webinars. You're going to hear from various voices across the community sector, but we really want to acknowledge that we respectfully have been participating in this collaborative work on the traditional unceded territory of the Secwepemc people, land also known as Secwepemcúlecw. And the Secwepemc people have lived and cared for these lands since time immemorial. We recognize their ongoing impacts of colonization and want to affirm the importance of advancing truth and reconciliation through meaningful action. As we work to build a welcoming and inclusive community together, we're committed to listening, learning, and working in respectful partnership with Indigenous people.
So before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. We have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So please post any questions you might have for the speakers in the question and answer box. And we also encourage you to participate in the chat throughout the webinar. Another piece is that this is a recorded session, and we ask you to please turn off any AI recording transcriptions or recordings, and we will provide a recording in a follow-up email and also on our website after. Finally, at the end of the webinar, we have a survey link that we'll post in the chat. And if you could please take a few moments of your time to fill out this survey, we would greatly appreciate it. It helps us make our webinars better in the future. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about BC Healthy Communities. We are a team of planners, public health specialists, and community engagement practitioners operating at the intersection of planning and public health. Our organization is a province-wide, not-for-profit, facilitating the development of communities where it's easier for people to be healthy and well. Next slide, please. Our PlanH program supports local government engagement and partnerships across sectors for creating healthy communities. And our PlanH program is offered in partnership with the Ministry of Health as part of the province's health promotion strategy. And this webinar is part of our Healthy Public Policy series, where we provide a showcase for the important projects that we've supported through PlanH, and also to discuss key topics that are important for our communities. So now I will pass it over again to Tanya, who will introduce the project, the presenters, and the larger collaborative group behind this work. Thank you.
Okay, so as I mentioned, today's webinar is a little bit different than others because you'll hear from voices from across various sectors in our community. Collaboration was really the foundation of this initiative, and we'll talk more about this during the presentation. But for now, just let me introduce the rest of our team. I think we have a slide for that. Lovely. So Amanda Eastwood, as one of our team members, is with Shuswap Immigrant Services Society, as well as Vernon Local Immigration Partnership Council. Janelle Ramel is with Interior Health Community Health Facilitator. Sarah Zudoff is with the City of Salmon Arm. Lana Payne and Sherelle Anderson with Rise Up Indigenous Wellness. They're currently presenting at a conference in the Yukon, but they've recorded a lovely video to share in today's webinar. Also missing today, we have another member, Jen Gamble, who is with Shuswap Immigrant Services Society, but is unable to attend. Okay, so just a little bit about Salmon Arm. The population that we have in our community is about 20,000, and that's according to the 2021 stats in the Canada Census. And we certainly have more people in our surrounding areas in our more rural communities. And we have Indigenous communities as well. There are 4 Indigenous bands nearby the City of Salmon Arm. So Adams Lake, Nisconlith, Squillax, Te Secwepemcúlecw, and Splatsheen, with Adams Lake and Nisconlith having land within our municipal boundaries. We are located on the Trans-Canada Highway between Vancouver and Calgary, and we are fortunate to be surrounded by beautiful mountains, lakes, and forests. Okay, so this is a bit of an overview of today's presentation. You'll notice there's time for some Q&A at the end of the session, and we look forward to answering any questions that may emerge from folks. And you'll notice as well on the bottom right-hand side of the slide is a quote that really grounds the work that we've been doing together. And I'll just read that to you now. People are like a mosaic. Each piece different, yet each equally important. On our own, we are unique, but together we create a beautiful work of art. And that was contributed by a newcomer to Salmon Arm in 2019. So it's kind of a beautiful representation and grounds us in this work that we've been doing. Thank you.
Yeah, so to introduce the strategy, we've got a picture on the right of the front page of the strategy document. And we just wanted to mention the key elements that built the strategy. Relationship building was probably the most important element. Centering it on lived experience was essential as well, and a process of collective learning and collaboration. It's also important to mention that it's an evolving working approach rather than a fixed plan. So every year it will change depending on the need. There were 3 main phases of the project, but today we're just going to talk about the first phase. And next slide. So why Salmon Arm needs a strategy? So we've found from multiple sources that racism was an issue in the community. There'd been very low levels of newcomer retention. And in my work working directly with newcomers, most people reported having issues of racism happening frequently to them, almost on a daily basis. On the right of this slide, we have a word cloud that I created from putting lots of reports of racism from our community, and it picked out some of the key words. So that just gives you a brief overview of some of the reports we were getting. And also we have a visual of the visioning session from the Youth Collaborative. And in those sessions, they said racism was definitely a key issue that needed to be focused on. Below, we have a community scan done with younger youth and their parents, with many different instances as well. And Rise Up Indigenous Wellness also did a community scan with Indigenous people, talking about accessing services. And again, there were many, many issues highlighted there. And next slide. So here, again, like I was saying, in the Rise Up scan, Indigenous people have really been struggling with facing a lot of racism in Salmon Arm. There was almost a complete exclusion in Indigenous voices being used for decision-making at a municipal level and in other areas of the community. And there's a strong need for building more respectful, relationship-based engagements that weren't just tokenistic. And there was a really, we saw the need for Indigenous leadership too. On the right is a photo from a film project I was doing a few years ago with Louis Thomas, a local Indigenous elder. And he told me during that project that he was told not to drum and sing until his people were happy. And that really kind of emphasizes the ongoing impact of racism on different communities. And the next slide. Yeah, so the demographics have been changing, like in many towns across Canada. We have an aging population at the moment, and they're just aging into retirement now. So there's less and less young people in the workforce. So newcomer numbers have been increasing to meet that need. And the graph below the population pyramid, you can see that the numbers at Shuswap Immigrant Services have steadily got higher and higher. Newcomers have given so much to the community that it's been great because they've been able to fill so many labour shortages in healthcare and other areas, and they've strengthened the working age population. They're contributing skills, entrepreneurship, and to the long-term economic growth of the city. It's just important when we have so many people coming here to contribute that they feel welcomed and want to stay. And that's one of the key areas that needs to be improved.
So further on to the need, I mean, there are definitely benefits to advancing anti-racism work, both at an individual and community level. When we think about health, it's not only shaped by healthcare, but all the conditions in people's daily lives, such as income, employment, housing, education, opportunities for social inclusion, community connections, transportation, and access to services. So when it comes to racialized people and experiences of racism and how it directly shapes these determinants, we know racism can limit access to safe housing, economic opportunities, fair treatment in healthcare, and culturally safe services. These inequities accumulate over time and lead to poorer health outcomes from the cumulative effect on physical, mental, and social health that impacts a person's ability to achieve and maintain good health. Because racism is a determinant of health, doing anti-racism work is a part of doing health equity work. When we actively reduce racism within systems, in services and programs, and in workplaces, we remove barriers that have historically harmed racialized communities. Anti-racism efforts to support fair outcomes to care, better health outcomes, and more equitable opportunities for people across the lifespan. Ultimately, this moves us closer to health equity, where everyone can achieve their full health potential without being disadvantaged by racism. Next slide. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, advancing anti-racism work also helps to benefit everyone in communities by creating safer, inclusive communities in ways such as helping to create safer and more respectful schools, workplaces, healthcare settings, and public spaces, people feeling more comfortable showing up as themselves when they know discrimination is not tolerated. It also builds trust and strengthens the community's sense of safety. When people feel valued and respected, their social connections grow and belonging increases. Inclusive communities also benefit from cultural diversity too. So new perspectives, traditions, and experiences that make a community more dynamic, creative, and resilient. Next slide.
And as Tanya mentioned, we knew from the very beginning that this initiative had to be rooted in multi-sectoral collaboration. So if there's one takeaway that you take from this presentation, it could be this, that meaningful and sustainable change happens when many sectors are not just consulted, but actively shaping and owning the work. And so you've likely heard the phrase, go slow in order to go fast. And so we took that to heart. And we began this anti-racism strategy by bringing together 5 key community partners that are in the diagram there, just across the sectors. Each partner then could bring unique expertise and relationships and influence within their different systems. And collaborative work requires so much. Sometimes people say it takes triple the amount of time. It takes trust and humility and flexibility, and it can feel slow. But by going slow at the beginning, we could position ourselves to move faster and farther together. Next slide, please. And so 2 years before the PlanH grant, we formed something called the Shuswap Youth Services Collaborative through the Building Safer Communities Fund. And so this was a multi-sectoral collaborative as well of 20 organizations that now meet monthly and all serve vulnerable youth in the community. And often small rural communities like Salmon Arm face so many resource challenges, but I think like a superpower of rural communities can be the ability to collaborate. And so the premise of this youth collaborative is that we are stronger together. And so relationships, relationships, relationships. So if you're beginning an initiative and you already have relationships established, start with that and then invite other organizations in. And as Amanda said, the need for an anti-racism strategy was identified in the community. Collaboration was already happening on a larger scale. And so then when PlanH funding, when the opportunity arose, we were ready to submit a grant. Next slide, please. Oh, Tanya, you're muted. Oh, Tanya?
Gotcha.
There you
I
go.
gotcha. Thanks, Sarah. That's perfect. Some of the work we did at the Shuswap Youth Services Collaborative before the PlanH funding came to be was developing our understanding of systems change. And we did this through a variety of professional development opportunities. And one of the visuals that we started with was the iceberg visual around systems change. And we talked a lot at that meeting about how we often spend our time as organizations and municipalities kind of reacting and responding to events and crises that are above the surface of the iceberg. But we know that to make the greatest impact, we really actually need to focus and shift to look at what's underneath and potentially fueling and causing those events and crises that are happening at the top. So understanding that individual programs or structures aren't necessarily enough. And we needed to move out of working in sort of those system silos. So we knew that policy development, particularly done at the multi-sectoral collaborative level, could be one of the most powerful tools for transformation. And we knew as a group that it would be worth spending the time to really dig underneath and address some of the root causes of the issues that are often unseen. So if we wanted that community level change, we knew we had to change how the processes and the systems interacted with one another in our community, and that was going to take a lot of little steps and relationships and collaboration and unpacking over time. And so we wanted to get at some of the policies that we could change to address those root issues. Okay, next slide. So we know that systems are interconnected, whether we coordinate them or not. We know there's overlap, people seeking services in multiple different ways in our community. And so many issues like racism are what we call wicked problems that are really damaging and impactful. And so we knew that racism can permeate all sectors of life: healthcare, education, employment, financial institutions. So regardless of which policy you're creating, collaboration helps to reduce some of that duplication, opens up collaboration, and helps to close gaps and leverage the limited resources that may be available. It does require that shared ownership. And so having some of that multi-sectoral collaboration allows us to share language together, share an understanding of the challenges that we may be dealing with across our community, sharing some of the commitments so that we're feeling like we're working alone in those silos, and sharing some of the data and the metrics across systems so we can understand the impact of some of those issues across our sectors. And then we also share the responsibility. So we can actually, as a collaborative group, dig in and start to collaborate on how to make things better across our community sectors, working together, and hopefully not get that burnout of resources in our community and work together. So we knew multi-sectoral collaboration was critical when we were starting to develop the anti-racism strategy for the Shuswap, because we had some of that experience in our Shuswap youth collaborative prior to that.
And the city holds a unique role in that collaboration. And so the city has a unique, neutral positioning to coordinate all of the sectors and to apply for unique funding opportunities such as PlanH, and to really strengthen project sustainability. So in October, the anti-racism strategy was endorsed by City Council. And endorsement by City Council really legitimizes the work and signifies to the greater community that all residents matter. And we were able to ensure that the implementation of the anti-racism strategy was embedded in the OCP, the official community plan. And that's the guide for the next 10 years of city projects. So now the implementation of the anti-racism strategy is a municipal priority, where staff and leadership can align all the operational plans within this strategy, and future councils will also inherit this commitment. So having the city involved in your project really aligns systems and strengthens partnerships and enables that cross collaboration to deepen. Okay, next slide, please. And the plan was always the greater outreach to the youth collaborative and to beyond the partners that were originally involved. But we gathered 5 organizations across the sectors just to make it more manageable for our quarterly meetings and the few virtual ones that were interspersed. And so as Amanda stated, the development was phase 1, and now we're currently in phase 2, the implementation phase. And that's where we hope to expand to create our outreach, to create that local immigration partnership council, as many other cities across British Columbia have. Next slide. And often when you look at strategies, it seems that municipalities or organizations just had a very clear vision before they began the work. And our team certainly didn't. And so as Janelle and Amanda explained, we did understand key principles before we began the work. Equity, Indigenous partnership and leadership, centering lived experience, that system change and collaboration. And so we committed to collaboration before we even had clarity. And we tried to prioritize relationship building over the speed of the project. So as Amanda will now explain, the strategy really emerged in a unique way. It emerged through dialogue and not top-down design. Next slide, thank you.
Yeah, so here is a diagram to explain kind of the process we went through, and kind of just to emphasize the importance of not having a clear path, because when we're trying to make sure it's led by people with lived experience and Indigenous voices, we need that to kind of lead and help us find what the need is. And then we need those groups to figure out what the solutions are going to be and how that's going to happen. So in this diagram, you can see that initially the working group with the community partners was set up, and then we formed Indigenous Voices Group and the Equity Advisory Council. And those were the first steps, and these groups then guided the direction and priorities of the strategy. And so we were able to create the plan with clear actions and accountability that was really relevant to the people who were living in the community. And next slide.
It was crucial that Indigenous voices shaped this strategy because meaningful anti-racism work must be guided by the people most impacted by colonial systems. As a part of this process, our work focused on building meaningful relationships by listening first to Indigenous lived experiences in the Shuswap, learning from Indigenous voices about their needs and concerns in the community, working side by side, and allowing these identified priorities to inform and guide our direction as a part of developing the strategic goals and the strategy. So Rise Up Indigenous Wellness is and was a partner in this work. They are a nonprofit organization in Salmon Arm that is Indigenous run and offers programming to Indigenous youth, families, and children. They also run training workshops for settlers to better understand truth and reconciliation, as well as understanding of cultural competency. They have designed and run 4 truth and reconciliation workshops for community organizations and municipal employees currently. Next slide. So we have a video from Sherelle Anderson and Lana Payne. They're both co-directors of Rise Up Indigenous Wellness, and unfortunately they are not able to make it today as they are currently out of province. We wanted to thank Lana and Sherelle for their involvement and their support in this work. And now we want to play a video, which is a recording from their voices around the importance of centering Indigenous voices and perspectives. We can't hear the sound.
Rise Up Indigenous Wellness. Mike, I am Lana Payne Purcell, a member of the Hackshaw Band at Statlium Nation, and I too am co-director of Rise Up Indigenous Wellness.
We have a few questions for you, ladies. First question is, why are Indigenous voices important in this work?
So we always center Indigenous voices because for too long, Indigenous people have been had their stories told for them,
Our histories were told wrong, and it's important that we start unpacking our biases and understand that there's racism built into what is Canada and what is our systems of power. So we need to start putting those Indigenous voices at the forefront and listening to the stories, even though they're uncomfortable.
And by centering those voices, we're not indigenizing programs. We are putting the voice right at the forefront and start.
Okay, thank you. Why is truth and reconciliation in training important?
It's really important to for social agencies and people who are working directly frontline to embed truth and reconciliation into the work they're doing in order to honor Indigenous communities, in order to have that voice embedded, as Sherelle said, embedded within the work they're doing.
And I think we need to really look at the truth first before we can take the steps towards reconciliation. And it's a path that both non-Indigenous people and Indigenous people need to take together, as friends and as allies together. It's not just one-sided.
Thank you. What are some wise practices for working with Indigenous bands and organizations?
I would say one important thing is going local first. So making sure to consult locally prior to bringing in people from outside of your local Indigenous community.
And I agree completely with that comment. And also learning those protocols from the local First Nations, and also taking taking that first step to form the relationship with Indigenous people and not expecting it to happen overnight. It takes time and it really to form a friendship more than anything, not a business transaction.
Yeah, often we think about come in instead of expecting the Indigenous communities to come to you. Come to the gatherings, come to the events. Be open to joining in and not always expecting the Indigenous community to come to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next slide. Great. So we wanted to just take a moment to summarize some of the points that Lana Sherelle had spoke about. So we know meaningful involvement and centering Indigenous voices ensures policies and programs are grounded in living and lived experiences and are inclusive of Indigenous perspectives, which should help to the outcomes to be more culturally safe and effective. So trust must be our starting point. We cannot move forward towards reconciliation without first acknowledging the lived experiences of Indigenous peoples, the harms caused by policies and institutions, and the ongoing impacts of colonization that continue today. This is an essential step toward meaningful change. Only then can our actions be grounded in respect, accountability, and genuine commitment to do better. Learning local Indigenous community protocols before engagement is essential because it shows respect for the cultural practices and self-determination. When we take the time to understand and follow protocols, we build trust, avoid causing harm, and create the foundation for meaningful and culturally safe relationships. So forming relationships takes time. They say that relationship building is like 25 cups of tea. Trust isn't created in a single meeting or through a quick exchange. It grows slowly through repeated and meaningful conversations where people consistently show up, listen, and learn from one another. Lastly, another opportunity that we can take too is to look for events that are happening at our local Indigenous communities, the events that they're hosting, so that we can attend these gatherings where we can take the opportunities to learn more about cultural practices and enhance our cultural competency, make connections, and just kind of be in that practice of walking the talk and showing up. Next slide.
So yeah, some tips for equitable engagement. So yeah, doing this work and being white, I had to be really mindful and careful about methodologies and the process. are used. The key element was making sure that lived experience was highly valued. And on the left, the diagram shows the process, which was very clearly outlined to the people participating. So at the beginning, we got the groups to identify the issues, and then the Indigenous and the newcomer groups would propose solutions. We'd take the solutions to the Anti-Racism Committee and create goals which would be brought back to the groups. And then the goals would be listed and we'd try and achieve the goals. But just having that cycle and making sure that everyone knew why their voice, why we were listening to their voice and what was happening with it, makes people feel more valued. Another area was to try and share the power and make sure that meeting structures were decolonized, not only for Indigenous people, but many other cultures are much more relational. So having a strict agenda doesn't always go so well, but making sure the facilitator was an equal and everyone is working together to tell stories and come to a solution was a lot more effective. And next slide. Yeah, we used lots of different methods to reduce barriers. So traveling, going out to an area that would be easy for people to access with transportation, providing childcare, making sure that all our work was trauma informed. Offering flexible honoraria is important too. If it's just a random gift card, it can, people might feel uncomfortable as if it's just an act of charity, but if we do a bank transfer or offer people cash, it means that it's much more effective for reimbursing that effort. It's also really important to have a non-extractive approach. So never asking one person to be the spokesperson for a whole religion or a whole community, just having that understanding that everyone's an individual and they have a very valid opinion, but they don't need to have the pressure to speak for a wider group. When talking about racism, it's also really important to remember that it's very traumatic. And I didn't want people to come to a meeting and think because they're there, they have to share something. So we would always talk about subjects. And if racism came into the conversation, that was fine. But being very, very mindful not to re-traumatize people or put people in an uncomfortable situation. In this slide, I've got a few examples of a way we reduce language barriers. So sometimes we'd use as little language as possible so people could maybe put a dot or have some other way of showing what their feelings were about something. And next slide. And yeah, we also try to offer many flexible, accessible ways to be involved. And we have some of those here. On the left is a picture where we used shadow puppets. We got people in groups to talk about situations at work where they'd experienced racism or people they knew had. And within the groups, they chose one story to show as a shadow puppet play. And then at the bottom is a map where people tried to think about whether they felt like they had a sense of belonging in Salmon Arm or whether they still felt, even after years of living here, they belonged more in the country where they had originally come from. So there's just some different methods we used. Also, storytelling was very effective in a circle where people are telling and contributing to stories. It was a method that's very effective with Indigenous groups and many different cultures. And the next slide. And yeah, just quickly, this was a few weeks ago. We had a session where we imagined the perfect community for newcomers. So I got newcomers to say everything they would have in a perfect world. And we tried lots of different questions and ideas, and this was just reflective of some of their thoughts on that. And next slide. So after all the consultations and working with different groups, we came up with 7 strategic goals for the strategy. And we've done some work towards all of these in this year, and they're all in the strategy. So you can have a look at the strategy and go through these in some more detail. But I'll just highlight a few of the things we did this year. We've delivered workshops where we looked at people's policies and procedures, and we've had lots of community events, including a dance event where over 200 people attended, including Indigenous elders and newcomers and local people, and everyone had a great time, and there was lots of very positive feedback that people felt like they'd really integrated with the wider community. We've also started working towards I think Sarah mentioned earlier, forming the Local Immigration Partnership Council to kind of oversee some of these goals and continue to make sure that newcomers' voices and Indigenous voices are involved in the process. And we've also worked towards strengthening relationships with Indigenous communities. And I'll hand it over to Sarah to explain a little bit more about that.
Next slide, please. Right. So as Janelle also mentioned, we often say it takes 25 cups of tea to build relationships. And we recognized early on as a community that we're probably at about cup 1 or 2 and with our local bands. And so there's lots of opportunity ahead. And so in their video, Rise Up, Lon and Shrell identified the need for truth and reconciliation training and really starting with that truth part. And so now in phase 2 of this project, all city staff will take Indigenous awareness training, and Rise Up is also hired in part 2 to develop another truth and reconciliation, kind of an extension of what they presented in phase 1 for all municipal staff as well. And so knowing that we needed to strengthen our relationships with the local bands, we successfully applied for the community to community grant to extend the work, this anti-racism strategy work. And so we have a feast planned for April 15 with Nisconluth Indian Band, and that's for City Council and Nisconluth Council and staff to come and gather together. And really the only agenda is to strengthen relationships, develop cultural awareness, and really learn local protocol. And I think Janelle had also mentioned about Indigenous relationships. They can't just be project-based or transactional, like Shrell had said, but they really have to aspire to be longer term and respectful engagement. Okay, next slide, please. And so we have many steps, next steps, a huge spreadsheet that will go well beyond the PlanH granting period. And so this project just continues to unfold and then open up unexpected opportunities. And so I think Amanda had mentioned we're continuing to focus on expanding our community partnerships, the engagement of the Shuswap Youth Services Collaborative, and then the continued education and awareness piece. And we're always trying to leverage resources to apply for additional grants and then to continue this initiative. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so just to conclude, the goal of this work is to help create a more equitable and welcoming community, a community where everyone feels like they belong and has an equal voice in decision making. And on the right, there's a diagram showing how the process unfolds. So initially, we'd start with engagement and building awareness throughout the community. And the awareness will then lead to practice change amongst community organisations. And then the idea is it will lead to policy and systems change throughout multiple organisations. And in the end, it will create a community where equity and belonging work for everybody. And the next slide. So yeah, this strategy was built on listening, trust, and long-term relationship building. where lived experience was central to making the work effective, and the collaboration was essential in making it stronger and more impactful. But most importantly, it's a living, evolving approach, and communities don't need the answers to begin. Starting the work will create the path forward. So yeah, that's the end of the presentation. So I guess we'll move it over for questions and answers.
Thanks very much, Amanda and Sarah, Janelle, and Tanya for such a great presentation. It's such an important project, and there are so many useful tips and examples of how to do this work respectfully and from the bottom up. So thank you again. Yes, now we have time for a few questions. And just before we go into the questions, I just want to remind people that we'll be posting a survey link shortly, and we encourage you to take a moment to complete the survey and give us some feedback. And so again, if you have any questions, please put them into the question and answer tab, and we will read them out. So the first question that I will direct to Amanda is there any way to see a full copy of the youth visioning session?
Actually, that one would be a good one for Sarah to answer, because you were more involved with the youth visioning session.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to send it to Erica, and you can disseminate it to all the participants. And just to back up, it was we did first one with the whole Youth Services Collaborative. So as 20 organizations, we sat around and talked about the needs and the gaps and the strengths and the stretches of our community. And then we also did the same with youth. We had over 120 youth in different focus groups. And it was really fascinating to compare those two visioning sessions and those graphic illustrations together to see how the youth were experiencing our community and how the youth service providers, some of them were similar and some of them were really different issues. So happy to send you both of those if that's of help to you.
Thanks so much, Sarah. That's great that we can pass those on. I have a question. I'm wondering if you can tell us more about how this collaborative group worked, and how you dealt with decision making and navigated different opinions or approaches. I'll send that to Amanda first.
Yeah, so the collaborative group for the anti-racism strategy, we would meet, but we'd often meet after we'd met with the equity group, so the newcomers group, and we'd look at a lot of the feedback through that group and then decide how that could be formed into goals that would be applicable to different organizations. But because everybody was representing their own organization and would have a deeper understanding of that, we'd kind of work with them as being the expert on their organization. So that's how we worked, taking everyone's opinions and then coming up with a collaborative approach that would work for everybody.
If I can just add to that too, Erica, I think a lot of our learning has just been, or I think we can credit it to working with Indigenous communities and the idea that every voice around the table is equal and is needed in order to understand that whole picture. And so that's just that really beautiful image that Lon and Sherelle, in working with our Indigenous bands, have given to us. And so that was kind of a real guiding principle. But you know, I mean, off the record, it's a lot more work and it's harder to collaborate as equal partners. Even doing this slide presentation together, where we each did different slides and each were different speaking in different parts. It's more work, but in the end, if we can just continue to remember, together we are stronger. So it was just beautiful to learn from Janelle's perspective, Amanda's, Tanya's from the school district, and the Shuswap Immigrant Society with the newcomer, training and expertise. And then together we came up with a much better project than any one of us could have done. So it's worth the effort.
Yeah, can I add a little bit to that too, Sarah, just in terms of the relationship? Like we talked about the iceberg and just those 25 cups of tea, like even with our group, the Shuswap Youth Services Collaborative also created some foundational relationships across our community sectors that could then also be joined together and leveraged to bring together the group for the anti-racism strategy. So I think that was, and we did some professional development around coming out of silos and some of those things together that we spoke of in the presentation that I think were critical to us being able to do this kind of systems change and collaboration with a bit more openness, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And I just wanted to also add just one more thing too. I know for like our group, and working together, I would say like for us, with, I believe Sarah had mentioned it. I mean, we did alternate having in-person and virtual meetings, but it was also quite helpful too. When things would arise, it'd be easy just to pick up the phone and just like to give Sarah a call or to give Amanda a call. So, I mean, I think that's also just goes to speak to like the trust that was kind of established early on with at least like us kind of working together as well.
Thank you. I have another question here about policy. Can you speak more about the policy support? Do you give policy support to all organizations in town? And what does this look like? I think this sounds like maybe I'll direct it at Sarah first.
And I actually might punt it to Amanda first, and then I'll go back.
Yeah, so with policy, that's part of the project that we've only just developing so far. What I've done is I got some of the groups we're working with to help develop a checklist so people could look at their policy with a checklist and see, have they addressed this, have they addressed that? And so we tried to kind of define this checklist. And I've given it to some of the groups to review and with their suggestions, and I've still got a few more to look at it. And then we're going to pilot it with 2 or 3 organizations and see how it works. And then once they've looked at the areas they need to improve in their policy, we will take their new additions to their policy back to the group and have another look at it from the perspective of someone with lived experience. And the idea is then we're going to create some trainings as well along with that can go into the different organizations. So yeah, we've just started working on it. But yeah, it'll be interesting in the next 6 months to see how we adapt it and how it works.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that too, just the nice thing about being multi-sectoral is that each of us can go back to our organizations and sectors, using that strategy kind of as a guiding principle to look over our policies and to ensure that these 7 recommendations are implemented. So on the city's end, we're looking at updating some of our policies with this guiding document and recommendations. So.
And actually a few weeks ago with the Youth Collaborative, we did a short activity. It was kind of like a community of practice where people shared their best practices in reacting to an incident of racism. So that was getting all the knowledge from the different areas and creating a handout and then handing it back to everyone so they can steal all the good ideas from other people. So we've tried different approaches.
Yeah, and then another commitment we have too about policies is, as the Youth Collaborative meets monthly, we don't want this to be a strategy that just sits on the shelf and gets dust on it, but to actually be working with it regularly. So we've committed the first 5 to 10 minutes of each of those monthly meetings for the next year to be just creating that brainstorming community of practice approach, to be dialoguing about it and keeping it active and alive.
Great, thank you. So yeah, this this great interaction between policy and practice and input. Thank you. I'll put this to Amanda. I'm also wondering if you could tell me a bit more about the process of first identifying that racism is an issue in the community and that needed attention, and then getting it pushed forward as a strategy that City Council then passed. Were there any challenges in this process? And are there any tips to give other people trying to get something done in their community that they know needs attention?
Yeah, so I think I started doing some anti-racism work in 2019, and we did have a group formed then. And there was definitely, I feel like if people aren't experiencing racism, they're often not aware it's happening in the community. So there can be quite a big gap of knowledge and maybe some denial. So I think there is definitely a big, it takes a bit to actually get to the point where people want to react. But yeah, I think by kind of spreading the word and sharing stories, and also explaining the need to have a more equitable, inclusive community, not just for newcomers, but for many other people. Like a lot of the same things, if someone for the LGBTQ community or for neurodivergent people, I think if everyone's used to making sure they're inclusive, it helps everybody. So I think just trying to get people on board through different methods like that. And also, there's definitely workplaces that have been mandated to do more anti-racism work. So sometimes by helping people do that work and giving them resources or offering trainings, you can get more people interested as well.
Yeah, and I think also collaborative work leads to more collaborative work and more collaborative work. And so Tanya, Amanda, and I were also working together on developing a new program for newcomer youth. And racism was identified within that program, and that Amanda already had said, well, I've been working on racism over here. And then Tanya said, yeah, it's a real issue in the schools. And we knew at the city level, we didn't have strong policy there. So it's, in working with multiple collaborative projects that we're involved in, that, you see an issue arise and then you just remember together we're stronger. So let's group together. And then let's present it to the city as a group initiative, not just one organization taking this on. And then the city was very receptive to opening it up once we had all the key partners involved.
Thank you. Another question that someone posted, could you talk a bit more about the equitable engagement activities that you did? Again, I'll put this to Amanda first.
Yeah, so some of the engagement for about 17 years, I've worked with newcomers. So I've worked with lots of refugees and people from different communities. So a lot of the time, the way we structure, even just the seating arrangements, it makes a big difference to how people feel in the room. So definitely, if you have people in a circle, often everyone feels more equal than if you have someone on a desk at the front or looking kind of in an authoritative position. So even just tiny tweaks can be helpful. With different language levels, there's many different things you can do. So having less text, I've even had pictures and used many different methods to get communication across. Another method I've used is having small groups where they speak the same language, but knowing that maybe 3 people will not be able to speak English, but one person can and has quite good written skills. And so just grouping people in that way so they can communicate in their own language. I've also often, if I've had a bigger group, made sure people are just work like in pairs communicating, and then we'll feed it back to the main group, because it can be really daunting having to speak in front of a lot of people, especially when it's in a different language. Yeah, so those are some of those methods. But also by using art, we found that it has a really different effect, because people are so busy producing the thing on their page. Often the information and things they start talking about are quite surprising. So we found, even people I've worked with for years, we found out some quite new information that I would never have thought of before. We were doing one project where they were making maps of Salmon Arm, but how they felt in different areas, so more of a kind of and why they felt like that in this area. And one woman from Ukraine and someone else from Syria was saying they kept drawing fires from where the fires happened, and they explained that when we had the fires locally and they were evacuated from some of the outlying areas, it was like reliving the war they'd been in before. And it was interesting that now gives that piece of information when we're planning for evacuations, that we will have some people that it is extremely traumatic for, and just it is interesting the amount of information that comes out even with low language levels. But yeah, there's so much about different engagement methods. Yeah, if someone wants to contact me and have a chat about more, I'm happy to do that.
Great, thank you. And we'll just post your contact in the next slide. I just want to ask one last question. How are you finding navigating different funding streams and or reporting requirements with such an awesome collection of partners who are working across sectors?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, because as you know, even a PlanH grant is only 1 year long. I mean, that year just goes so fast. And so it's a bit of a juggling match, but there always needs to be one lead organization that at the beginning has been identified to ensure the continuity of applying, and then the funds being managed, and then at the end the reporting piece done. And so the city has taken that lead initiative on by leveraging the time and the grant of the Building Safer Communities. And so yeah, when you work multi-sectorally, there does have to be an identified lead at the very beginning, for sure.
Thank you.
And also, if your community does have a local immigration partnership council, their funding would be very closely aligned with some of this work. So they may be a good person to get in touch with. I know sometimes they work out of the municipality and sometimes out of a settlement agency, but they would be a good person to leverage.
Great, thank you. So we'll end our Q&A session, and I'll just ask for the last slide. And thank you again. Thank the speakers again, Sarah, Janelle, Amanda, Tanya, and also Laurel and Janelle, who sent in their video. Thank you for such a valuable conversation, and thank you for everyone who joined us today for this webinar. If you want to follow up with us, we have some contacts on the screen here. Amanda and Sarah can answer questions about the anti-racism strategy and any resources they discussed. And if you would like to talk about BC Healthy Communities and PlanH, my contact is up there too. So thanks again, everyone.